Hey, everybody. Welcome into the Flagship Podcast. I am Chip Brown of Horns247.com, joined as always by my esteemed colleague and proud Tampa Catholic graduate and fan of Sanford and Son, as I just realized. One of my favorite shows growing up. The one and only Eric Henry. E. Henry. How you doing, man?
Listen, it is another beautiful morning to quote the great Butch Davis, Chip. You know, when I always ask Coach Davis when I was covering FIU, how you doing? He's like,
Great Butch Davis.
Said, woke up on the right side of the grass. And that is something I live by. Couldn't be doing better, my man.
Yeah, man. We'll get another day.
There you go.
Another day. It's a beautiful thing. Hope everyone is rocking and rolling out there in our audience. Texas fans, non-Texas fans. I know we got a lot of A&M fans who listen to this podcast because they want to know what's going on with the burnt orange and white in Austin. So we're here to tell you. So we're going to do that. Lots to get into on today's episode of the Flagship Podcast. Full disclosure, it is Wednesday, February 26th. And the NFL Combine is about to get going in Indianapolis at Lucas Oil Stadium. What a terrible name for a stadium, by the way. Hate to say it, but hey, Indianapolis, they've got the Indy 500, they've got the NCAA headquarters, and they've got the NFL Combine, Eric. 14 Longhorns are in Indianapolis, including Quinn Ewers, who as kind of interesting timing. But his camp lets it be known that Quinn Ewers suffered an abdominal tear, not a strain, an abdominal tear. Must have been a low grade tear, but a tear nonetheless, an oblique tear that Quinn Ewers suffered against Michigan. Not against UTSA. He aggravated it against UTSA, and he played with that injury pretty much the whole year. Of course, he had the ankle injury, the hip drop tackle ankle injury against Kentucky that also nagged at him. Eric, at this point, we should be giving Quinn Ewers a Purple Heart for his playing with pain this past 2024 season. The timing of this, right as the combine begins, is sort of a message to the NFL that, hey, Quinn Ewers, tough guy, played with injuries, and still threw for 31 touchdowns and led his team to the college football playoff. Your thoughts on this oblique tear that Quinn Ewers played with this past season?
Chip, I'd be remiss if you were talking about poor names for arenas. I'm a little surprised that the man who hails from the city that has Little Caesars Arena is critiquing the names of stadiums. But I digress. To get back,
we don't drink oil, car oil. You know what I mean? Motor oil.
I digress. To get back to Quinn Ewers, I couldn't.
Little Caesars got that good cheesy bread too. Now, come on.
I will get back to Quinn Ewers. That's what I will do.
Okay, Quinn
as opposed to acknowledging the comment that Chip is making, because I don't want to offend anyone's sensibilities. So, with that,
it's no via 313, but anyway.
Yeah. Listen, hey. That's now we're talking. The timing of this coming out, Chip, is not surprising because it's combine season, right? You know, you see this happen routinely yearly where guy X, maybe is a little bit banged up and his camp comes out and the news comes out. Well, he's actually been playing through this instead of that. Also, and Chip, you can attest to this, the amount of medical evals that these guys are going to go under, all that stuff is going to come out eventually at some point, right? So better to get ahead of it as opposed to, kind of be behind the 8 ball there. You say, man, Quinn deserves a Purple Heart for playing through what he played through. This is what I would say, Chip, and I'm not trying to be condescending when I say this, but I feel like to any of us who cover this team regularly or watch this team regularly, Quinn Ewers was not healthy throughout the year, right? To what degree of that was subjective, right? And we'd ask throughout the year. I know you were on it a large chunk of the year, right? Is Quinn healthy? And would ask that question to Steve Sarkisian. You get a lot of, well, no one's really healthy this time of year, right? Which of course is true, and that's a great way to cover it, to cover your bases there by saying that no one's really healthy this time of year, Chip. And it wouldn't shock me. This is, and I'm not trying to play doctor, right? And no one will ever accuse me of being a medical doctor. I'm lucky to let me walk away with the master's degree. That's over my, I think it'd be my left shoulder there. I'm only good at one thing, it's running my mouth and writing. But Chip, it wouldn't shock me if it's a situation where, the medical personnel said, hey, it's, as you said, a low grade tier, maybe a notch or two above, a strain. If you want to call it, and I'm not saying any medical professional said this, I'm just talking out loud. If we wanted to call this a strain, we could, because we don't have to really call it a tier, right? That doesn't surprise me at all. I think the big thing, Chip, and I'll let you take it from here and you kind of take whatever direction you want to go in, but I hope that this kind of changes the prism that Texas fans, or some Texas fans, I shouldn't say all, viewed Quinn Ewers' playthrough last year, right? Because when, I quite frankly sent out a tweet saying that it was fairly obvious Quinn was playing through some pain, the majority of the responses were, complimenting him for his toughness. But there was two responses, Chip, that came up multiple times that I didn't think were fair. One being that Steve Sarkisian was so married to Quinn Ewers, figuratively speaking, that he had quote unquote a healthier option in Arch Manning and refused to play him. I don't think just because Arch may have been healthier doesn't mean he was better in that case. That's one. And step two, that Quinn should have been, a quote unquote better teammate by, if he truly is banged up, it's affecting his play on the field, to sit out. And really quick on that last part, I think that's completely unreasonable. Chip, we want our athletes to play through the injuries, right? Like we talk about load management and all that stuff. Quinn did the opposite of that, right? There's step one. Step two, what athlete mentality is going to say, yeah, I got the guy on the bench who's behind me and is capable of doing X, Y, or Z. I'm not going to try and gut it out there. I think Quinn Ewers earned that right to go out there and gut it out. So I thought those responses, what I saw were a little bit off base. It's my take, but yeah, I'm not stunned that news came out, because it was clear that Quinn wasn't 100%.
Well, I do think that was a worst case scenario for Steve Sarkisian, because there's no doubt that Steve Sarkisian wanted to reward Quinn Ewers' loyalty for coming to Texas, because Quinn Ewers started the momentum that Texas is on currently. Remember, Steve Sarkisian had Casey Thompson and Hudson Card. He didn't want either of those guys. He wanted Quinn Ewers, and Ewers came. And then when Quinn Ewers returned for the 2024 season, I think that's when he and Sarkisian sat down and had that conversation that Sarkisian alluded to, saying, win a national championship, maybe, go to New York as a finalist for the Heisman and be a top pick in the 2025 NFL draft. Well, that all took a left turn when this oblique injury happened and the ankle injury against Kentucky. And as long as Quinn Ewers could, medically be cleared to go out on the field, I think Steve Sarkisian was going to roll with him. And then we saw in the Georgia game, when Ewers clearly wasn't over that injury, he didn't look good against Oklahoma, even though they won 34-3. And he was under siege against Georgia. Took a huge shot to his back on a strip sack, and by Dylan Everett, who could have won the Thorpe just on his games against Texas alone with 3 interceptions. But it became a thing where I think Sarkisian was like, I want to reward Quinn, and he's going to be an excellent quarterback in the NFL. I think he's going to perform well at the combine because he's healthy. He says he's healthy. And so it was a very delicate balance. It's a tricky balance for Steve Sarkisian, because he wants to pay off the Quinn Ewers experience, because Quinn started the momentum, came to the program, played at a high level, beat Alabama and Michigan and won big games, showed he's totally capable, was worthy of the recruiting ranking that he had. And then he's got, Arch Manning sitting there. And I do think that it was kind of a deal that, hey, you're coming back for 24. Let's go try and accomplish all those things that we talked about. It didn't work out that way, but it also was the end, Eric. I think with Quinn, it was both of them. Quinn even said at SEC Media Days, feels like this is my last year of college football. So that when they get to the end, and maybe it wasn't the year that Quinn Ewers wanted, it was still the end. Steve Sarkisian needs to move on to Arch Manning now. That's how it goes. And there's a kind of a time frame and a platform for these guys. And credit to Quinn Ewers again for not taking a bunch of money to go be a mercenary somewhere else for a year and then go to the NFL draft. He wanted his experience in college to be at Texas. And so now we watch him get ready to go into the NFL waters and see what that brings. But this makes sense, Eric. And yes, the timing right before the NFL Combine, you bet. That's so that all the NFL teams that are gathering in Indianapolis get the message that, hey, Quinn Ewers was not 100%, played through it, led his team to the college football playoff. I don't blame him for not getting in the end zone on 1st and goal from the 1. I blame the play calling. And, Cam Williams didn't block he didn't block Sawyer one bit when Quinn gets rocked in the strip sack and fumble return for touchdowns. I mean, for the touchdown that ended the Ohio State game. That was Cam Williams, who needs to pick it up there. He's one of those 14 at the NFL Combine, and yeah, he's got all the measurables. I don't think he liked being in school, so he's going to go make his way in the world today at the NFL Combine. And he's a guy who's got a lot to prove, show this week that he's ready. I'm very interested in watching Cam Williams this week, Eric.
Yeah, Cam's an interesting prospect, right? I talked to a couple buddies of mine who are in the NFL draft kind of scouting business, and when you talk with them, they all see all the things that you just talked about, right? In terms of a guy 6'5", 6'6", 330 something, his athleticism doesn't grow on trees. Okay, right? There's that, and like you, I can't say that I've explicitly asked Cam when we had a chance to speak with him at, I believe that was Peach Bowl media availability, in terms of, hey, do you like school? I didn't explicitly ask him that, but he did strike us as a guy who didn't come here to play school. All right. So there's that. But no, Cam's, a really interesting prospect. I think, Chip, Kyle Flood's one of the best developers of offensive line talent in the nation. I think that it isn't really up for dispute. And I in one way, I look at Cam as a byproduct of that, right? Someone who clearly is very raw, but you've gotten maybe a little bit more out of him at this juncture in his career and with his experience in terms of just, on-field performance, right? I am curious to see how some of those things, Chip, if the penalties were a one-season blip, you'd be like, all right, maybe it's a guy who just had a rough year, right? But even in his lone start against Kansas State in 2023, when he filled in for Christian Jones, he had 3 penalties, right? So granted, I mean, it's not, we're not talking about 2-3 season sample size, but whenever Cam Williams has been on the field, he has struggled with penalties. So I'll be curious to see how that kind of shapes up. But overall, I don't see how, Chip, 3 positions in football, are a premium, especially come draft time. You never have enough. Edge rushers, offensive linemen, specifically tackles, quarterbacks. I don't see how Cam goes and takes care of business and tests well in Indy. His stock doesn't rise, and now he's not a first-round pick, to be completely, honest with my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy who struggles with the speed rushers to the point where I almost wonder if he'll end up as a guard at
Sure.
6'5", 3. They list him at 335. Texas had him at 360 at one point. I'm sure it's somewhere in between, but the guy's got a massive frame, and he could very easily be a guard in the NFL. We'll see. But yeah, Cam Williams, a guy who was ready to leave college and go take his chances in the NFL. Hayden Connor is a guy who's getting a shot. He's been invited to the combine, and I think that's a great opportunity for him. Jake Majors as well. Jake Majors, it's 5-year starter at Texas, 57 starts, school record. The guy's just solid, great snaps. He's not a mauler. He's a tactician. He's a really a master of leveraging his body, positioning his body to get in the way of defensive linemen. Very interested to see how he rolls. Isaiah Bond, who battled through the ankle injury throughout the year, never seemed to be quite right after that Oklahoma game. But a guy who said last year, Eric, when Xavier Worthy ran 4.21, looks like I got to run 4.20 at the combine next year. So let's see how his wheels are rolling. Matthew Golden, you could make an argument, MVP of that receiver core from this past season, just clutch catches. Who will ever forget 4th and 13? And your guy, Gunnar Helm. Come on, E. Henry. What do you see for Gunnar Helm?
Chip, I'll quickly touch back on or circle back to what you mentioned in terms of the 40 time. Maybe I'm a little bullish, but Jaden Blue, I want to know if Jaden Blue can touch that time. And maybe, Chip, it's because I think if Jaden Blue, who in my opinion is a lock for 4.2, right? If he gets a great time and you take a look at his hands out of the backfield, someone who's never been had an issue in terms of pass catching, and just get the kind of the fumbling issues under control, I think Jaden Blue could skyrocket. That's just me. I think there's a team that's going to look out there and say that guy's a weapon. We can, and granted, you have some backs in this draft, right? So it's going to be a bit of an uphill climb for him, but that's the one I'm interested in terms of the 40 time. So not that you're wrong, knowing Isaiah Bond, that's the one I'm interested in. But really quick on Gunnar Helm. I think, Chip, in my mind, the testing numbers are going to be huge for Gunnar Helm, right? Because I think he's one of the rare, maybe we shouldn't say rare, but like dying breed cases, Chip, where, usually the combine is like, okay, we, have these talents that kind of stand out to you, and that they're athletic and so on and so forth, but you want to see how they compete amongst the best and kind of see how well they interview, right? In terms of making that transition to the next level. Gunnar Helm, I feel like, is the opposite. Now going to interview well. Probably have a good Wonderlic score, right? All the fundamental football stuff, you're getting from Gunnar Helm. But in terms of strength, I'm curious to see if he can put up, a average to above average number for this year's tight end class in terms of bench. And can Gunnar Helm get below 4.8 in the 40 in my mind? I think if he can do both of those things, when you look out there on the field, big body tight end, large catch radius, plays athletically, right? He may be one of those guys who maybe he doesn't get below 4.8, but when you put on the field, he never looks like he's a big plodding, tight end, right? Doesn't look like he's lacking athleticism. That's someone I'm going to be curious to see how smooth he looks, kind of in the deal, in the pass catching and some of those natures, some of those aspects. So, definitely a big time week for Gunnar Helm as well.
Yeah, I mean, Gunnar Helm he could end up being the best tight end in this draft. Andrew Makuba could end up being the best safety in this draft. I know, Eamon Wari from South Carolina at 6'3", 227, and he's a guy who could run sub 4.4. You get a guy like that, the NFL, teams are going to go boing, and Makuba is undersized. Here's where I think the measurements come in, Eric. Jaden Blue's hand size. What is it? Is it close to, 9? Like barely 9? If it is, NFL teams are going to go, okay, that's why he's got fumbling issues, small hands. With Andrew Makuba, he needs to measure at 6 feet. Texas listed him at 6 feet, 190. I hope he measures at 6 feet because that's one of those points. You've had some undersized guys like Antoine Winfield. Hell, Quandre Diggs at 5'9" went in the 6th round. He's in his 10th year in the NFL. Sometimes, like if you go back and look at the safeties in Quandre Diggs' class in 2015, he's outperformed almost all of them. You got to look at the guy too. Like roll the film on Andrew Makuba because that guy sees the game, man. He plays so fast. He runs the alley. He takes great angles. He hits you. Really big Andrew Makuba guy. So, yeah. And Jahdae Barron, we know, projected as a first rounder. So's Matthew Golden. So's Kelvin Banks. So should be fun. Record 14 Longhorns at the NFL Combine, which gives you the possibility that maybe Texas ends up with more than the 11 who were drafted a year ago, which tied the record. So, interesting. Some folks don't care about the Combine. It's like roll your eyes and look. What 3 years? 21. Texas didn't have anyone there. Coming off the 2020 season, they sent kicker Cameron Dickert and Josh Thompson to the Combine. That was it. No one cared about the Combine. When you got 14 guys there, it's interesting. All right, Eric, let's get into some Texas basketball. What the hell happened, Eric? Rodney Terry's Longhorns go to South Carolina. South Carolina had not won a game in league play. But guess what? Texas was their slump buster. And now the chandelier has fallen. The piano has fallen on top of the heads of the Texas basketball team. Eric, what happened?
Well, before getting that, Stan's dad, Chris Bennett, appreciate you watching us live on YouTube. Of course, we're live on YouTube, live on the Horns 24/7 Twitter feed as well. When you talk about Texas men's basketball, Chip, it feels like it's been much of the same for the past 2 years. Inconsistency, trying to find a level of cohesion with, integrating new guys while mixing in a couple of old guys, older, returners, I should say, not old guys, but returners. Now you've got injuries in this case with the 2024 team. And, what was frustrating / maddening watching that game was there's only one player on South Carolina's team who could take over the game and really beat Texas, right? And that's no disrespect to Jamari Thomas, but Colin Murray Boyles is the guy, right? CMB is the guy, depending on how the rest of this season plays out. Obviously, South Carolina's not going to be a tournament team, but how the rest of the season plays out in the offseason, in the NFL draft, NBA draft, testing and combine and whatnot, CMB could be a lottery pick, right? He's the only guy on that team, especially with Texas' deficiency in terms of, having bigs, right? Night in, night out, wondering kind of where that production is going to be. The only guy could beat you, and he does. 22 points, 10 boards, and that's with fouling out with over 4.5 minutes left in that game. CMB had an outstanding performance against the Horns and established himself early, Chip. Texas went up 7-2. And from there, CMB rips off 10 straight points. And it's like, wow, I know you saw that game, Chip. That wasn't a situation where it's like, man, you just can't, stop this guy. That was a situation where when CMB scored his first 6-8 points, it didn't look like, okay, he's going to cool off. That looked like, okay, Lamont Patterson's club, they see an area that they can attack, and they're getting after it. And CMB did just that. On the flip side, Texas just didn't get scoring outside of Trey Johnson. He was the only Longhorn in double figures. Arthur Kaluma came off the bench, Chip. He was clear to go from that knee injury, but it's clear that he isn't 100%, and you got to wonder where he's at. It's one of those things where, to kind of give you guys a refresher, Arthur Kaluma gutted out that knee injury against Missouri in that win, which quite frankly, Chip, is probably the best win on Texas' resume right now. So it's one that they needed. But Rodney Terry said in the postgame, we asked Art, hey, can you gut it out? It's up to you. It's your call if you want to gut it out. They let him do that. And now, seemingly, that knee injury is starting to flare up again, right? It caused him to miss the A&M game, which Texas ended up winning, and it's caused them to have some issues here. I'm not questioning the decision because, as I said, Texas probably needed that win. But in the long run, we'll see what it's going to do to this team. Kendall Weaver is going to miss his 12th straight game, didn't play against Vandy. This team, Chip, as I said, multiple episodes, night in, night out, Trey Johnson's the only thing that you can guarantee, you're going to get. And Arthur Kaluma, when he's healthy, he's going to give you everything he has. Outside of that, these guys, their roles change from day to day, game to game. And I just think, Chip, that with the combination of injuries really has this team's been snake bitten by those things. And, we'll talk about it and take it or leave it. They're in a situation where their backs are up against the wall, depending on what bracketologists you use. I know CBS Sports, Jerry Palm has them out of his latest field. There's some other bracketologists who have them in. They're going to need to win at least 3 of the next 4, in my mind. In some cases, you might say they need to win 4 of 4. But yeah, Chip, this is what this team has been all year long. And the hope was, maybe through 15 games, maybe through 20 games, they'd figure it out. We're entering game 28. They're going to take on Arkansas tonight. They're still trying to figure it out.
Yeah, I just don't understand why we haven't seen Tremont Mark at the point where he played for Arkansas last year. It seems like they've juggled it between Jordan Pope and Julian Larry, but they haven't given Tremont Mark a chance either. And when we saw Mark and Trey Johnson with no Arthur Kaluma in the Kentucky game, they got into a rhythm. Tremont Mark was finding his shots. Trey Johnson was finding his shots. I don't understand. Jordan Pope and Julian Larry aren't good enough as distributors to play the point at Texas with these two guys. Put the ball in the hands of Tremont Mark. Let him create for himself, create for Trey Johnson, and everybody else can just go hit the boards, because we don't know what, Jordan Pope lights it up for 40 earlier in the year. And then it seems like more often than not, now he's 1 of 8, 1 of 7. Yeah, there's no rhythm offensively. And Frank Haith, who's in charge of the offense, I don't get it. So it's disappointing, but the fans are checking out on Rodney Terry left and right. And it's always been an uphill climb. It's always been an uphill climb for Rodney Terry, because he had the hot run after Chris Beard gets fired. Chris Del Conte's sort of in a tight spot. How can I not give him the job? He just went to the Elite Eight, was up 13 with 12 minutes left to go to the Final Four, lost to Miami. But all right, Eric, let's move on to the Texas women, because they're the number 1 team in the nation.
That they are.
Come on. Texas softball's been number 1. Men's tennis has been number 1. Now Texas women's basketball is number 1. And in their first game as the nation's number 1, they grind out a 57-26 win over Georgia, in which they led 22-16 at halftime. The offense was struggling, except for Taylor Jones, who had 17 points, 16 rebounds, and 5 blocks. But man, their defense, Eric, was suffocating. And Georgia's scrappy. Their record's not good, but to go on the road and win that game after an 8-day bye, off week, if you will. And it was weird because Vic Schaefer stuck with his veterans in that game. Like, Breonna Preston and Jordan Lee and Justice Carlton played a big role, really big role in turning that LSU game at the beginning of the fourth quarter. They brought the energy that kind of sparked Maddie Booker and got him going. Well, in this game, it was veterans. It was Maddie Booker, Shea Holly, Rory Harmon, Jack Mwenentanda, and Taylor Jones. We didn't see a ton of Kyla Oldacre, didn't see much of Breonna Preston, didn't see much of Jordan Lee or Justice Carlton. Not quite sure what that was about, but Texas women, they're rolling.
Listen, Chip, in my mind, that's what you want to see, right? I think that's indicative of not only a really good team, but a team that can win a national title. That one night they can get great contributions from the freshmen against LSU, a top 5 team in the nation. And then on another night, it can be the veterans, as you talked about, taking over. And like you said, Georgia's a scrappy team. Coach Abe, former UCF, was head coach Katie Abrahamson-Henderson heading back to her alma mater there. And that's a program that I think will get better kind of in that rebuild mode. But you said it, right? That was a game that at the half, give Georgia credit for fighting because it was close. But the veterans take over. And to be able to win that way with defense, to me, super impressive, Chip. Let's spin it forward because there is, listen, all the games are big at this point. And obviously the Longhorns can't afford to be tripped up by a team, certainly a team that's unranked like Mississippi State, but it's a big game because it's a homecoming. Blair Schaefer heading back to Starkville. Of course, Blair Schaefer was a star guard there for her old man with the Bulldogs back in the day. Still holds some records there. My memory serves me correct. And Chip, I tried to look this up. I for some reason, you can correct me if I'm wrong. This is the first time, because obviously, Texas moving to the SEC, that Vic Schaefer heads back to Starkville. All right, I just want to confirm that. For some reason, some of the logs of the games are a little odd there. But yeah, this is the first that Vic Schaefer heads back to Starkville. Chip, you were on the beat at the time. I've just read some of this stuff. So, if you want to provide the audience with greater context to this, but Vic Schaefer had, just bought a huge home, property, right, in Starkville before the offer to come back to his hometown and come back his home state, I should say, of Texas. So yeah, certainly, be interested in, I think Vic should get a great ovation. I mean, he did a great job with that program, but interesting to see what the reaction will be because, the folks in Mississippi State can be a little feisty, not quite Arkansas feisty, but they can be a little feisty there. And I'm sure they have long memories of Vic, basically intimating that he would be there for a long time, but you'll have better context on me than that, Chip.
Well, it's interesting. The Georgia goes by the Lady Bulldogs. Mississippi State just goes by Bulldogs. But yeah, Vic Schaefer. I hope he was able to sell that house, Eric, because sometimes you build the big house in a city like Starkville. It might be hard to sell. You know what I'm saying? But hey, I'm no shot. No
just
shot.
Being real. Just being real, Chip.
Right. Just hoping he maybe sold it to the next coach or whatever. But yeah, this will be, look, this is one of those games emotionally the Texas players need to be ready for. And this is a back-to-back. This is back-to-back road games for Texas. So they should handle their business. He's got reinforcements. I know this. Breonna Preston don't care. She's the honey badger. She doesn't care about whose homecoming it is or what. She just wants to ball. And I'm very interested to see how these young freshmen continue to bolster this team because you just can't say enough about Taylor Jones. She's been so steady, so good. And even though Kyla Oldacre was kind of the closer there for a while, Taylor Jones kind of got the whole show against Georgia and delivered again. Remember how big Taylor Jones was in the wins over Tennessee, Ole Miss on the road. Those were good performances from Taylor Jones. This Texas women's basketball team is getting better. And they're not getting max performance from like Shea Holly. She's not shooting it nearly as well as she did a year ago, but she's a great defender. She is the on-ball defender assigned to the other team's best perimeter player, and she's been delivering there. All right, Eric, let's get to Texas softball and Texas baseball. Texas softball, they suffer a loss to Stanford. Tegan Cavan, as good as she was against Nigeri Kennedy and Texas Tech in the Bevo Classic, Texas goes on the road to Arizona. And I don't know what Mike White's doing. He's having them play all these games in a weekend, but I guess that's softball. But he had Cambria Salmon start the Stanford game. She gave up 1 run on 2 hits, and Mike White takes her out. And it's like, okay. He felt like they were seeing her pitching. Can we get a little bigger sample size? I mean, I don't know, but he pulls her, brings in Tegan Cavan, and she gets shelled. I mean, she gave up 6 runs, 7 hits. It was not a good day for Tegan Cavan. Texas loses to Stanford 9-5. Now they've fallen actually from the number 1 spot. It depends on which poll you look at. In the ESPN poll, Oklahoma is back at number 1. Nonetheless, Texas bounced back. They did beat number 13 Arizona, and Tegan Cavan was on the mound again. She still got touched up a little bit in that game compared to what she did against, the 18 strikeout game against Nigeri Kennedy in the instant classic. Nigeri Kennedy strikes out 11. It's a 2-1 game in cold weather in Austin. But Eric, I'm not worried about Texas softball as much, but I was a little worried about pulling the plug on Cambria Salmon a little early. Don't want to get in the freshman's head. She's a power pitcher. I don't know if you have thoughts on Texas softball. We can move right to Texas baseball if you want. I'll leave it up to you.
Yeah, I mean, we can transition into baseball, Chip.
Okay. Well, last night, Texas wins their 6th straight game in a 6-0 shutout of Incarnate Word. Now, Eric, I know people are like, Incarnate Word, come on. Incarnate Word came into the game as the number 1 offensive team in Division I. Batting .393 is a team, and Texas turned the lights off on that offense. The Incarnate Word 1 through 6 hitters went 0 for 20 in a combined 4-pitcher, 2-hitter for Texas. Jason Flores, the starter, his first ever appearance in his first start as a freshman from Naaman Forest down, southern Texas. And he was fantastic. Gave up 1 hit and looked comfortable. I mean, this is a guy who came in at 230. He's up to 245, Eric. We've talked about how Matt Couch, the strength coach for baseball, he's like Torrey Beckton. He's got these guys in the weight room. They're putting on pounds. Schloss wants to intimidate in the SEC, wants big, burly guys, wants to overpower you. You want to get in a fight with us? We got muscles on our muscles. And Jason Flores, he doesn't look like a freshman, Eric. That's a big dude. Got that big ass, calves, hams, and ass. That's what you want. And those pitchers, man, the power, the strength, Roger Clemens style. But yeah, I mean, these guys are all throwing that sinker. Max Wiener, the pitching coach, got them all throwing that sinker. He wants to induce ground balls if opponents can even get a bat on the ball. So Texas has won 6 straight. They're getting ready to go to Vegas. I'll be there. They're going to play Washington, who's like 2-5. Just got wiped out by Stanford. They're going to play Texas Tech, who's 1-5. What the hell's going on with Tim Tadlock's Red Raiders, kids? And then they'll finish it up against Illinois, Eric. But man, we're starting to see some guys come to life. Ethan Mendoza, the Arizona State transfers now. He's gone 6 for 7 in the last 2 games, moved from batting 9th to the leadoff spot and did not disappoint against Incarnate Word. Had another home run. He's got 2 now. He's stealing bases. He's making plays. But your thoughts, Eric?
Yeah, Chip. I'm going to start with 2 guys from the Incarnate Word win. I think are crucial to see them come on here. You led with one, Ethan Mendoza, right? When we spoke with Jim, I after the season opening series in Arlington, heading into the Dartmouth series, he noted that Mendoza, even though he was batting, no pun intended, below the Mendoza line. For those who are not
he opened 2 for 12 this season.
For those who are not deep baseball heads, the Mendoza line is 200 batting average. He was batting below that, and Jim said, hey, he's going to come on. He's had what they call good quality at bat percentage. A hard hit percentage. He was hitting the ball hard, just hitting spots where the fielders are. Sometimes that happens in baseball, right? To see him, as you mentioned, right, really get on the streak here. 3 for 3 last night. I think that to me is huge. It's interesting to see what Schloss is doing at that leadoff spot. When we spoke with him, he was adamant, like, honestly, need a fast guy there, right? The analytics show, and Schloss is a big analytics guy, that if you can just get someone on base, right? When you got guys like A-Rod, Adrian Rodriguez, Max Ballou, it's better to give them someone on base to drive in as opposed to worrying about starting off with, a fast guy and kind of the old traditional method of thinking, right? So we'll see what happens there, because Kimball Schuessler had led off throughout the Dartmouth series. Ethan Mendoza leads off last night. So tinker around with that, but I think that's interesting there. In terms of the arms, Ruger Riojas, good to see him bounce back. He had Chip in the second game of that Dartmouth series. I covered the first 2 games. He was cruising along, after Jared Spencer had run into a little bit of trouble there. He was cruising along and then just got in a jam where, walked a guy, hit a guy, and then end up turning over, the bases juiced to Thomas Burns, who shut him down. Which, by the way, Chip, we didn't have a chance to talk about this. This was after the last time we recorded. Man, you're going to love Thomas Burns, Texas fans. I can't think of a guy better quote coming in. Was a starter at Arizona State. You haven't seen Thomas Burns. Big guy from Wisconsin, Chip. 6'3", 240, big dude.
That's what I'm talking about, all these linebackers, Eric.
He was a starter at Arizona State. Schloss moves him into the bullpen, and I asked him, hey, just how much fun is it, right? Just the mentality with switches. You don't have to worry about holding anything back. And he's like, he lit up with a big Kool-Aid smile. I was like, man, it's amazing. How much fun is it just come out of the bullpen and start ripping baseballs, right? You can't ask for a better quote than that. But no, in terms of Riojas, good to see him bounce back. Didn't allow a run in the win last night. So yeah, this Texas team heading to Vegas. Chip Brown will be on the scene. Can't be mad at that, CB. Enjoy, my friend. And we'll see where the Longhorns come back, or how, kind of where they are when they come back from Vegas.
Yeah. I mean, I love this Max Wiener guy. We haven't gotten a chance to talk to him. Schloss hasn't made him available yet, but he tells these guys, the pitchers, he's like, we don't have roles. We don't have starters. We don't have relievers. We don't have closers. We have outgetters. And we're going to lead the nation in fun. So you see them out there in the bullpen. They're throwing their arms up. They're doing all kinds of fun stuff out there. And I think these guys are having fun. Like Max Grubbs, another guy. He was Texas's Friday night starter last year, and he's coming out of the pen. You got guys like Aiden Moffitt, who came from LSU, who's pitched like 1 inning. And Schloss said, we got to get some of these guys in. We're going to need them all in SEC play. It's such a grind, and the average pitching length of a starter in SEC play is 4 innings in a third. I mean, Schloss makes this SEC league play out to be, crawling through the Everglades in a bunch of alligators. But it's Schloss knows. I mean, he's been there. But man, Eric, Schloss is a hawk, because Ethan Mendoza and Thomas Burns were at Arizona State last year. A&M played Arizona State in that Globe Life tournament last year in March. They played 2 games against Arizona State. Mendoza lit them up, even though A&M won both games, 4-0 and 10-5. Mendoza lit him up. I think he was like 4 for 6 in the 2 games. And now he's a Texas Longhorn. Like Schloss and Mendoza was a freshman, breakout freshman last year. Batted .315, 35 RBI. Or no, 24 RBI, 35 runs scored. Schloss, and Thomas Burns. I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying, he pays attention.
Chip, real quick before we transition, to show Chip that there's always either a 6 degrees of separation from me or the group of 5. Do you know where Max Wiener played his college baseball?
Oh, give it to me.
Florida International, FIU.
Come on.
2017. I didn't actually cover baseball that first year. So I didn't cover him, but we overlapped because my first year on the beat was the last few games of the 2016 season. So yeah, Max Wiener at FIU Panthers. So it's always a connection, sir.
If anything has happened in the state of Florida, especially in the group of 5 in the state of Florida, my man
I
Eric
have some connection to it. That's correct.
Is an encyclopedia. Now, E. Henry doesn't know nothing about encyclopedias. He's too young for that. I had a set of encyclopedias my parents bought from like 1976. And you're like, aren't these a little out of date? Yeah. Now we have the internet. Okay, Eric. And kudos to men's and women's swimming. They win the SEC, both of them. Men's under our man Bob Bowman, who won the national championship at Arizona State last year and is now rocking it for Texas. And our girl Carol Capitani, Texas men's and women's swimming both claim the SEC championship as they prepare for NCAAs. All right, Eric, you ready to get into some take it or leave it?
Chip, I am absolutely ready for some take it or leave it.
All right, then let's do it. Let's do some take it or leave it.
We'll roll right into it. And this time I am serving to you first. So I will kick us off. Take it or leave it, number 1. Former Texas quarterback Quinn Ewers is going to be selected. He's one of the top 3 quarterbacks in the upcoming NFL draft. Take it or leave it, Chip.
I think talent-wise, he's one of the top 3 quarterbacks in the NFL draft. I just wonder if NFL teams are going to be a little gun shy because of the injury history. So I could see a team letting him maybe fall to being the 4th quarterback selected. Because we saw at the end, like guys like Riley Leonard and Will Howard were seen as quarterbacks who should be drafted ahead of Quinn Ewers. I think that would be a mistake because I think when Quinn Ewers is healthy, he's got an unbelievable arm. His deep ball needs a little work, but he can figure it out. So I'm going to leave this for right now, Eric, but I think talent-wise, he should be one of the top 3 quarterbacks selected in the April draft. What say you?
Chip, I am going to take this. I have been all in on Quinn Ewers as a prospect. I've been all in on Quinn Ewers that he's going to impress this week at the NFL Combine. If there's one thing you can't question about him, it's that he can toss the football around in t-shirt and shorts. The physical tools are there. You didn't just wake up, Chip, and people forget. This guy wasn't just 24/7 Sports number 1 overall recruit in his class. He was darn near unanimous as a number 1 recruit in his class. And he was coming out of South Lake Carroll. He's going to spin it. I have no doubts about that. And if Quinn can go there, I think Quinn will interview well. I think he will show that he's been, show the tutelage of being under Steve Sarkisian. I think Sark is going to fight for his guy. I think, and I've talked about this on this podcast and other platforms that, listen, we all know quarterbacks come draft time, they rise. I said it earlier this episode. Quarterback, edge rusher, tackle. You come out of the combine testing well, your stock's going to go like this, right? How much of that is, lion season, right? The NFL draft and, free agency and all that. I don't know. But I genuinely think, Chip, that Quinn Ewers will be a top 3 quarterback. I think he'll be 3rd. But I think it'll be top 3.
I like it. All right, Eric. Texas basketball needs to win 3 out of its final 4 regular season games to make the NCAA tournament, and let me give you the do I have it up?
Should be Arkansas, Mississippi State, Oklahoma, and
Georgia.
Okay, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Close with Oklahoma.
at Arkansas, home against Georgia, at Mississippi State, home against OU. What say you?
Yeah, listen, Chip. I was a little skittish on the idea that an 8-10 SEC team would make the tournament, right? Depending on which one it is. I'm talking about an 8-10 Texas team with their resume. I was a little skittish on that. I don't think there's any way in hell that a 7-11 Texas a team in SEC play makes the NCAA tournament. So they need to get to 8-10. 9-9 would be a lock in my mind, but they need to get to 8-10 to really push the envelope and say, hey, the SEC. And by the way, if I may sidebar for a quick minute, I don't think it's a coincidence that whether it's been Nate Oates or Bruce Pearl or, insert whoever, that these SEC coaches have all, John Calipari, have all post-game, when we spoke to them, they've come to Moody Center. The SEC is such a tough league. It's going to be harder to play an SEC play than March Madness. I don't think it's a coincidence that those coaches are making those statements because they're trying to campaign for this league, right? And especially a guy like John Calipari, whose team is on the bubble. So, yeah, I do think if they can get to 8-10, that'll get them there.
Yeah, and I guess we should probably be asking, will they win 3 of their last 4? Because I agree with you. And that's going to require, Eric, I just keep thinking back to the Tennessee game at home, to the Arkansas game at home. Those were games that Texas woulda, coulda, shoulda won. They didn't. Now they've lost to South Carolina on the road. They're going to have to win 3 out of 4, which means they're going to have to win either the road game at Arkansas or the road game at Mississippi State. Those two teams have been marginally better. Arkansas marginally better. I mean, this game against Arkansas, Eric, is almost an elimination game. I mean, they're very similar in resume, and John Calipari is John Calipari, and Rodney Terry's Rodney Terry. So the sad thing is Texas has Trey Johnson, and what an attraction for March Madness he would be. Right now, coming off this South Carolina game, I'm not buying into this team because it's like, why on earth aren't you playing Tremont Mark at the point? And just seeing, since he was the leading scorer at Arkansas last year and helped to, if Eric Musselman thinks he's good enough to play the point, why wouldn't Rodney Terry? Anyway, all right. So, yeah, they have to win 3 of their final 4. Do you think they do it, Eric? I'm going to say no.
I'm again gonna buy in. I'm gonna say yes.
Okay. All right. Take it or leave it. Number 3.
To bring us home, Texas women's basketball has done enough to secure a number 1 seed in the upcoming NCAA tournament. Take it or leave it, Chip.
You know what, Eric? And I was like, whoa, Texas women only have 2 more games left. As you pointed out, they only play 16. The men play 18. So we were talking about that road trip to Mississippi State, the reunion, Vic Schaefer going back home where he led the Mississippi State women's basketball team to 2 back-to-back runner-up finishes in the national championship game in 17 and 18. And we know that Vic is hell-bent, determined to get that national championship. I think he's got a team that can do it, although this women's basketball season is loaded. I mean, when you talk about USC, UConn, Notre Dame, South Carolina, but Texas is right there. So, Eric, when I look at the best of the best, I think Texas is better than South Carolina right now. I think you got USC, you got UConn, you got Notre Dame, you got Texas. I think Texas has done enough to be a number 1 seed. And of course, Notre Dame just lost to NC State. Notre Dame, one of the teams that beat Texas in their home building up in South Bend in overtime earlier this year. So I'm taking this, Eric. What say you?
I am taking it. I think just based on resume, not many teams can say they've beaten 3 AP top 10 teams, top 10 ranked teams in the span of a week. Texas can say that. I do think now Texas and South Carolina obviously have split the season series, right? I've said it before. I'd love to see another rematch between these two on a neutral floor. However, the SEC tournament is in Greenville, South Carolina, so that's not going to be a neutral site. If/when, and I do believe it's a when, these two teams play again round 3 in the SEC title game. I don't know if that's going to be enough to swing the tide at South Carolina's way, but that's the thing that I'm keeping an eye on is kind of how the SEC tournament fares and what that third game, because again, I do think we're going to get a third game, what that looks like.
Yeah. I'm more interested in the Texas women's basketball and women's college basketball in general than I've maybe ever been. Part of it's because the team I'm covering has a super talented roster and looks like they've got more upside. Texas has more upside because of what we saw from Breonna Preston, Jordan Lee, Justice Carlton in that LSU game. I feel like they were just giving us a sneak peek of the fearlessness that they play with. All right, Eric, good stuff, my man. And thanks to everybody for listening to this episode of the Flagship Podcast. Please like and subscribe to the Horns 24/7 YouTube channel. That's how we grow, and that's how you get notifications so that you never miss an episode of the Flagship Podcast. Until next time, we'll see you over at horns247.com. Become an annual member at horns247.com so that you get all the recruiting intel. We've been breaking news left and right. We're all over the recruiting scene. Dwayne Akina's coming back. We didn't even talk about that. I feel bad. But go to horns247.com and read all the content that we have. Eric has content up in his 4 Downs column about Dwayne Akina. I talked to all the former Longhorn defensive backs who went to the NFL and their comments about Akina coming back. So much to get into. Spring football around the corner. Get over to horns247.com. For Eric Henry, I'm Chip Brown. Till next time, stay safe. Keep the faith.